Ladies and gentlemen, welcome tonight. I'm just going to pass you over to my chaplain, Kate, to give us some words of wisdom and to give us a bit of blessing on this night. Thank you.
Well, good evening. In the church, it is Holy Week, which is the busiest and best week of the church year. So I am with you in body. Whether I'm with you in spirit, it remains to be seen. But of course, this week, who could not be struck but by the newsreel footage of Notre Dame on fire and hundreds and thousands of Parisians lining the streets watching this precious building under threat. And there was nothing they could do. They were utterly helpless other than they could be there and care and watch and wait. And it reminds me a little bit about Holy Week, when Jesus is going through the last days of his life. He's going through some really difficult things, and his friends, some of them run away and leave him, but some of them can do nothing else but be there and care. Now, the councillors gathered in this chamber have really tough jobs. There are so many problems addressing them and so many challenges to be faced. Sometimes you cannot fix everything, but you can be there and you can care. And I do pray that God will bless and guide you as you do that your best to be there and care for the people of this borough tonight. Amen.
Okay then, welcome to tonight's full meeting. We'll just go through the evacuation procedure. A fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside the Yorkshire Bank on the opposite side of the road. Please exit by the door which you entered the room, or by the fire exits which are clearly indicated by the standard green light. If you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. Please also make sure your mobile phones are turned off or set to silent. There's been no apologies received for tonight's meeting. Filming. Tonight's meeting will be filmed for publication on the council's website. All members are reminded that they must turn their microphones on before beginning to speak. The cameras will only point to the member when the microphone is on. Can I also suggest that members fully extend the microphone so that their speeches can be properly recorded? A microphone will be provided for the use by members of the public who are notified that they wish to ask a question or make a statement. Right, now I've got to go through two sets of minutes. We'll do them individually so that we can make sure that everybody's happy about things. So the first set of minutes, is everybody happy they're assigned the first set of minutes? Councillor.
The first set, is that the extraordinary meeting that you're referring to?
Do the ordinary meeting and then the extraordinary meeting afterwards. Is that okay? Is everybody happy with the first normal general meeting? Councillor Guthrie.
Clarification on the minutes. Are we voting on the 18th of February minutes or the January minutes, please?
We're voting on the 18th of February minutes first.
Thank you, Mr. The answer to the question for Lubs Czekosnovsky, top of the page 112 from Councillor Beaumont on that one. Fourth paragraph down, he states, I decline to note... Sorry, I'll read the full paragraph, then we'll get it right. I was invited to the BRV meeting at Weston Hall, but after consideration of the conditions imposed, of no participation in the meeting and consultation. Afterwards, with no control by the chairman, I declined. I note that Councillors Smith, Morgan and Guttridge are members of BRV. Mr. Mayor, I am not a member of BRV. I live outside Orchington. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Guthrie, we can take that out, it's not a problem. Councillor Evans, did you have anything to say on that?
Page 34 of the minutes, members may recall that Councillor Golby moved a motion following the question from Councillor Hancock's with regards to block paving in Bedworth Town Centre. Now, that motion actually received a recorded vote. The recorded vote is not included in the minutes on page 34. So I would like to question the accuracy of the minutes of the ordinary meeting on the 18th of February, and if members of the Labour group would like to contest that, I'm happy to put it to a vote of full council.
Okay, Councillor Evans, we'll check back on that and amend as necessary. Okay? No, we'll go back and check that it was recorded, and then and if that's the case, then we'll amend the minutes. Is that okay? Right, is there anything else on that? Okay, then, so with them amendments, I'm okay to sign that? Yes, Chair. Yep, okay, thank you. Right, okay then, so moving on to the January minutes. Is everybody okay if I sign them as the correct statement? Councillor Evans?
13, 14, 15 and 16, there were 4 recorded votes within the extraordinary meeting. Councillor Llewellyn Nash did attend that meeting, but her name is not recorded in the vote. So I've gone on the video, and she definitely does take part in all 4 votes. So that is not accurate. In addition, Mr Mayor, on page 14, you may recall that you actually moved a motion, a procedural motion, Mr Mayor, to stop Councillor Condacor from speaking in this meeting. The minutes say that the procedural motion was lost. My recollection, Mr Mayor, is that the vote that you requested was not accurate, because you only allowed those members who wanted to vote for the motion to put their hands up. You didn't actually ask against and abstentions. So I struggled to understand how the procedural motion was lost if we didn't actually go to a proper vote. And again, you can clarify that in the minutes of the meeting, Mr Mayor.
Honestly cannot remember back that far, so we'll have to check that and amend as necessary. Okay? Is that okay? I honestly cannot remember back that far. So apart from them, is everything okay? Okay, thank you. Interests, is everybody okay with the interests that are down? Or would anybody like anything else added? No? Okay. Announcements, I have a few. First of all, this Friday, Good Friday, is my parachute jump for the Mayor's charity. If anybody would like to sponsor me, it's online, or there is a sponsor form in with Lindsay's office, and any sponsors would be obviously appreciated. 3rd of May, we're having a 2-course meal, 2 live bands on at the Lord Nelson, again for the Mayor's charity. And then on the 10th of May, you'll be pleased to know that will be my last charity do, and that will be at the Civic Hall. So if you would like to attend that, the tickets are £10. So any support to that would obviously be appreciated. So that's all my announcements, and there's no announcements from Cabinet. So moving on to public participation now. Oh yeah. Oh sorry. Yes. Sorry. Councillor Gran, you would like to say something.
The following statement by way of an apology to Councillors Julie Jackson and Ian Lloyd. On 5th September 2018, I attended a meeting of Cabinet which was considering a report in connection with the Borough Plan. At that meeting, I made a number of comments questioning Councillor Jackson's integrity, and I subsequently refused to retract them despite being asked to do so. I acknowledge that I made inappropriate comments to Councillor Jackson, which I deeply regret, and I would place on record my sincere apology for any upset or hurt caused. Similarly, a little later on in the same meeting, I made a personal comment directed at Councillor Lloyd. I deeply regret making that comment and would place on record my sincere apology for any upset or hurt caused. I fully acknowledge that my name-calling and constant interruptions at that meeting were against the Code of Conduct, and I wish to reiterate my unequivocal apology to both councillors for any upset or hurt that my conduct caused on that occasion.
Much appreciated. Right, moving on to public participation. We have one question from Michelle Conacle.
Thank you. In October 2018, the recycling contract was changed. Most people in the borough will be unaware of this. However, as a result, some items that were previously not collected by the borough's curbside collection are now able to be collected. I only became aware of the changes to what could be collected as a result of looking at the paperwork and attending the internal overview and scrutiny panel in January. I asked for further clarification from the head of waste and was advised by email that the information on the website would be amended the following week, i.e. at the end of January. The council website still has not been correctly updated, so even if people look up recycling, they are not being correctly informed. Most people do want to do their bit and do recycle. Could the portfolio holder explain why the public have not been informed of the changes to what is now collectible at curbside? This would help to increase the amount recycled, which can only be good for our environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Conacle. Councillor Shepherd, would you like to reply?
Thank you very much for your question. I can confirm that the user guide is with our communications team, waiting to be updated with the information sent from our waste and transport team. The user guide is the information we link to the website to keep information consistent. Unfortunately, this update has taken a little longer than we planned, and we are working to get the information update completed as soon as possible. Thank you.
Right, now I have a number of questions by members. So I won't be allowing any supplementary questions because I'd like to try and get through the questions. But obviously, if we don't get through the questions, you will be supplied with answers to any questions that have been submitted within a week's time. So now I would like to invite Councillor Evans to ask his question, please.
Put on record my appreciation to the Friends of the Nook in Bedworth for the work they have done over recent years on the Nook. One of the concerns within the group is the accessibility of the site. Members may be aware that the Woodlands is a floodplain, and when the area does flood, it prevents people with disabilities from being able to walk the full circuit of the Nook. The group believes the issue could be solved if the height of the paths on the site could be increased. Obviously, the council has to comply with the Disabilities Discrimination Act. Could I ask the portfolio holder, or whoever will answer the question in his absence, to request that the Parks Department work with the Friends of the Nook to look into the feasibility of raising the height of the paths as a matter of urgency?
Evans. Councillor Jackson, are you replying on that? Sorry, I've already said there's been no supplementaries. I want to try and get through the questions. So, moving on with the next question, I'd like to invite Councillor Rudkin to ask her question.
For Housing, Health and Communities, advise Council how the grant monies for homelessness recently received will be used. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Taylor. The Council has been working with the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government for some time, and at the end of March we were awarded £150,000. This money is to allow the Council to contract a specialist support provider to work in partnership with ourselves and other statutory and third sector partners to provide intensive individual support for those who are or at risk of rough sleeping. This cohort of people often find it difficult to access existing services. This support will be provided from a designated hostel and will deal with a wide range of complex issues such as mental health and well-being, as well as treatment for addictions and to provide skills and training to access employment. This funding will allow us to assist 5 to 6 individuals from a hostel setting, along with a further 4 or 5 individuals who may be able to be temporarily accommodated elsewhere. This funding is currently only for a 12-month period. However, It will allow the council to provide personalised, intensive support to enable a move on to independent accommodation. Thank you.
I'd like to invite Councillor Elliott to ask her question, please.
Advise how much money has been raised this year by the Borough Lottery and how many good causes are benefiting, please?
Reply.
Councillor Elliott for the question. So far, we have 72 registered good causes through the lottery, and we have received for them about £28,988, a testament to the generosity of our borough and the endeavours of our local groups. We will be celebrating the Borough Lottery's first birthday this month, and you may have already seen our recently created mascot, which we hope the people of the borough will help us to name. Our currently nameless mascot is on view this evening in front of the Mayor, and I place on my thanks to Relax and Knit, who created it for us. The Borough Lottery came about as a result of staff's suggestions, and I am really pleased that it is successful in securing benefit to so many good causes. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
I would like to invite Councillor Glass to ask his question. Yeah, sorry. Councillor Hancock, sorry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Section 21 of the 1988 Housing Act allows landlords to evict tenants without providing any reason. Could I ask the Leader of the Council what actions we, as Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council, can take to urge the Government to abolish Section 21 of the 1988 Housing Act? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank Councillor Jackson.
Councillor Bell.
Thank Cox for your question. A Section 21 notice is contained within the Housing Act 1988 and is used for assured short-hold tenancies in the private rented sector. Often referred to as no-fault notices, they allow a landlord to seek possession of the home without the requirement to prove fault on part of the tenant. The notice is a prescribed format and should give at least 2 months' notice. It cannot be served earlier than 4 months into the start of the tenancy. Should the tenant fail to vacate the premises by the date contained within the S21 notice, the landlord can apply for an accelerated possession order. As there is no requirement to prove fault, as long as the judge is satisfied that the notice has been served correctly, possession will be granted without the need to attend court and therefore be required to await a court date, which can be some months in the future. Historically, there has been significant criticism of the use of this mechanism as it began to be used to remove tenants who complained about the condition of their home, thus dubbing them retaliatory evictions. A campaign was undertaken a number of years ago to abolish S21 notices. As a result, the Retaliatory Eviction and Deregulation Act 2015 came into force in October 2015 and amended the Housing Act 1988. This Act provides that where a tenant makes a legitimate complaint about the condition of the property and where the legitimacy of the complaint has been verified by the local authority, the landlord cannot use an S21 procedure for 6 months. This council always carries out checks to ensure the landlord has followed correct procedure where any customer approaches us requiring assistance following receipt of this notice. This council has also successfully prosecuted for illegal evictions. Bodies representing private landlords argue that the removal of the no-fault notice would be detrimental to those private landlords who do abide by legislation but who may need to repossess their home, either for arrears or because their circumstances have changed and they need to sell the property. They further argue that the removal of this mechanism would lead to many single property landlords to sell their properties and thus reduce the amount of rental stock available. The council can place homeless households in private rented accommodation in order to discharge its homelessness duties. Over the weekend, the government has announced plans to consult on Section 21 evictions in England. This council welcomes plans for a full consultation and will ensure a comprehensive response is submitted. Thank you.
Councillor Beaumont, Councillor Phillips.
For Housing, Health and Communities, I request to speak on this matter and request to move a motion in connection with the response under consideration, and if seconded, speak on them. The motion is that this council, in responding to the recently announced government consultation, states its complete opposition to so-called no-fault notices, Section 21, which gives little security to those in rented accommodation. I don't know if I have a seconder.
No.
Seconded.
Okay, has everybody had time to have a quick read of that? Councillor Concoy, have you had time to read it? Right, okay. Councillor Golby, you've indicated that you'd like to speak.
I'd like to make an amendment to the motion. This is in addition to what is set out in front of us by Councillor Phillips, not instead of, it's as well as. So to add the words that this council requests the leader of the council writes to James Brokenshire MP, Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government, to thank him for his announcement on the 15th of April 2019 that government will consult to ban Section 21 notices known as no-fault evictions, and that this council responds to the recent consultation as announced by the Secretary of State.
It's out, ready to... can we all have copies of that then, please?
Need a second.
Well, does that find a seconder?
I'll second that and reserve my right to speak, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Right, so we'll have to take a few minutes to get that copied and distributed so everybody can read it and take it in and digest it. So, talk amongst yourselves. Tell me what point of order it is.
It's to contention, and the time therefore stops on the 45 minutes, or whether this is included in the question time.
Yeah, we'll stop the time. It's a suspension, but we're not leaving the chamber. Councillor Concoy, you said point of order.
It's exactly the same.
Right, just want to check then, has everybody had time to read through that? And does everybody get it? Yeah. Okay then, so now it's had a seconder, so open up the debate on the amendment. Is there anybody? Councillor Conacle.
Thank you very much. I think the amendment is obviously nice, thanking someone for actually putting forward a policy that's been campaigned for many years. But there are some risks and some things that need sorting out, because obviously if we go through this process and change the laws so Section 21 evictions can't take place, there's a massive risk there'll be a massive spot just before the change takes place, which will put a massive strain on this council. So I think if we are writing to the Minister thanking him for making the change, I think we do also need to ask that safeguards are put in place so that there's no pre-change of law evictions. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Obviously, Councillor Condacor doesn't have much experience in this area of dealing with court procedures and how laws change, because you cannot legislate to stop someone issuing a case in the county court. You just can't do that. It's common sense. You can't do that. Unfortunately, whatever happens, whenever there is a change in the law, whether it be fees, whether it be a change in a procedure rule, solicitors, landlords, whoever will always try and buck the system and issue a number of cases before the change in the procedure rules comes about. There's no two ways about that. It happens. I've been through it a number of times. I've issued my fair share of these cases in the past, and I know what they mean to the people. You will not stop the evictions beforehand, before the law is hopefully changed. But I think this is a step in the right direction. It is listening to people who have experienced difficulties. Section 21 wasn't designed to punish people. It was designed to enable people legitimately to get their property back if they needed it back, not to punish people through no-fault evictions. There has been an abuse of the process, and I think that is commonly understood and acknowledged. So what we are doing is basically asking in the amendment, taking on board everything that you have said, but also add that extra step, a positive action, so that this council will formally respond to the consultation and welcomes the fact that the government has actually done this, because it just says we agree with it, with the aims of the consultation, but the motion as written and as proposed by Councillor Phillips doesn't actually take a positive step to act on our views. So I think our motion just actually gives the original proposal a little bit of oomph, and I don't see why anyone should vote against it tonight. I think it's quite common sense and isn't actually that political, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Jackson.
I won't be voting for this amendment this evening, and the reason is quite simple, because all the amendment is saying this council responds to the recent consultation announced by the Secretary of State. Our original motion, the motion moved by Councillor Phillips, said we would respond to the recent consultation, stating our complete opposition. That is not in the amendment, Mr Mayor. We welcome this consultation. Well, Mr Mayor, it clearly isn't in the handwritten note from Councillor Golby. Perhaps the mover of the amendment would like to make very clear what they are moving today.
Yeah, go on then, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It was quite clear, and I've said it and Councillor Golby said it, that it is, the proposal is as you see it on the sheet. You have the handwritten note, and then it keeps in the typed note which you have proposed tonight. It is both sections. I don't see how that is unclear. It's been moved and seconded. Councillor Golby said that in her opening statement. It was accepted by the officers when they asked for clarification. That is the motion. If Councillor Jackson is just trying to find some wiggle room to get off the hook because she doesn't like the fact that we're actually agreeing with her and doesn't want to have unanimity and wants to play politics, that's fair enough. But actually, let's call it for what it is. Please read the motion in its entirety.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Phillips.
Yes, to speak on the motion, and I've kept politics out of it, I can't support the amendment because I can't thank, in a way, this government for doing something that they should have done a long time ago. This was in Ed Miliband's manifesto in 2015. 2013, was it? anyway. So I can't support it. I'm not going to say thank James Brokenshaw for doing his job.
Councillor Phillips, Councillor Walmsley.
Completely support the intentions of Councillor Golby here. I think also the motion as amended with the additions of Councillor Golby to the motion as moved by Councillor Phillips, I think it was, apologies if it was somebody else, makes clear that actually that we welcome the government's consultation on this, and that very clear it states that we thank them for looking at this and proposing that we end it. So it's quite a simple motion, and I think it's quite a motion that we could all get on board with. But Mr Mayor, I beg that we move to the vote.
Walmsley, Councillor Hancock.
In my opinion...
Just give me a minute. Okay, so you're saying move to the vote. Does that find a seconder? Yeah. Okay, we'll move to the vote on the...
To challenge it. I heard it moved. There was nobody seconded it. I started to speak. I don't think you should be able to go back to something after you've already allowed something else. It's in your hands, Mr Mayor, and always I respect your decision. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Allow Councillor Hancock to have his speech and then move on. So, Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's not a speech. It'll be very brief. But, Mr Mayor, as I started to say, the amendment to the motion moved from this side of the chamber. In my opinion, Mr Mayor, that's over-egging the motion that's been put forward. That motion which is concise and achieves the objectives of the wording of that motion. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay then, so now we'll vote to move to the vote. So all those in favour of moving to the vote. Any against? Any abstentions? Okay then, so move to the vote then. So now we're going to move to the vote on the amendment. So all those in favour? Against? Abstain? Okay then, so that's lost, and so now we move on to the motion, substantive motion. So, okay, do you wish to speak on that, Councillor Phillips?
To it. The Prime Minister, Mr Mayor, said recently that millions of responsible tenants could still be uprooted by their landlords with little notice or justification. She says, this is wrong today and we are acting by preventing these unfair evictions. The government, quite rightly, will consult on abolishing Section 21, no-fault notices in England, meaning private landlords will no longer be able to evict tenants from their homes at short notice without, and here is the fair point, without good reason. Mr Mayor, to back up the Prime Minister's quote, the government said Section 21, which is hard to challenge, had become one of the leading causes of family homelessness. In fact, Mr Mayor, I was helping a young working couple who rented a room out in a house who were issued a couple of weeks ago with a Section 21. Luckily, we were able to find them somewhere else. Again, privately, because the council wouldn't be able to help them until they'd actually been pushed out of the door. There was another instance whereby I know a tenant who is so scared to complain about the condition of her home that they refused our help to start with when I asked the council to visit because they were scared of being turned out. That landlord came and visited, and still the work promised a year ago has not been done. So that will now include another visit and me actually talking to this vulnerable person to try and encourage her to let the council in. The landlord said he would do all the work, or they would do all the work, but who knows what conversations went on between the landlord and the tenant after we had called round. But like I said, a year on, the work has not been done. Mr Mayor, the CAB chief, Executive Gillian Guy, says the change was a groundbreaking shake-up and would prevent landlords from evicting tenants for simply complaining. The most recent research by CAB suggested that tenants who had made a formal complaint about their landlord or the state of their rented home have a 46% chance of being issued with a Section 21 eviction notice in the following 6 months. Heather Kennedy, a housing organiser at the think tank New Economics Foundation, said that she had experienced 2 no-fault evictions, including last winter, just after finding out she was pregnant. She said, "I know how brutal and terrifying no-fault evictions are. It is impossible to build a stable, rooted life as a private tender under laws like Section 21. Mr Mayor, obviously landlords, of which the majority are good, need changes too, i.e. to speed up the court process for eviction. I often wonder, though, why some landlords do not bother about antisocial behaviour by their tenants, but just keep taking the money. But at least the government, at long last, recognised the need to act Section 21. But those who do not tackle antisocial behaviours and arrears issues need quicker court action. I recognise it's a two-way street. Because you never know, Mr Mayor, when it might happen to a friend, a family colleague, a family member, a work colleague, and as the government said, it has become one of the leading causes of homelessness. So I support the motion. Section 21 needs to go. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Francox.
Mr Mayor, I was truly astonished that following on my submission of the question that I put forward tonight, that the government made such a quick response. Can't fault them for it, Mr Mayor. They must have heard that was coming. But I've heard something tonight, Mr Mayor. The Tories opposite accusing us of playing politics, when their amendment was quite clearly aimed at that political game. There is no need, Mr Mayor, to play politics with something like this and to praise their masters in London over something that should have been done is not right. Personally, Mr Mayor, I don't care what the colour of the government is. When things are wrong, they should be put right. There's something funny about that. Mr Mayor, our motion and the consultation by the government, if they take on board the comments that we will be making, and I'm sure lots of others will be making, as has been pointed out by Councillor Phillips, will be a good thing. But there are lots of other issues around it, Mr Mayor. There are other ways that landlords, if they want to be difficult, can be. We've got to be careful that they don't use something in the way of just hiking up the rents, to achieve the same thing of getting people out earlier. Now, to force tenants out like that clearly would be wrong. Now, let's be absolutely clear, Mr Mayor. Not all tenants are bad. As most things in life, it's a few people that do bad things. It's not everybody. But those rogue landlords out there that do this type of thing need to be, that's not me, and dealt with. Apologies, Mr Mayor, I lost my track because of the egg timer going off.
This motion now.
What? Oh, for the motion. I'll put this in writing to you then, Mr Mayor, probably.
Mr Chairman, Councillor Golby, if you can do the same. Okay. Move to the... Okay. Okay, then let's move to the vote on that then. So,
All for a recorded vote, Mr Mayor.
Okay.
If you could indicate for or against the substantive motion, please. Councillor Beaumont. For. Councillor Brindley-Edwards. Councillor Brown. Councillor Croft. Councillor Daffin. Councillor Doherty. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Evans. Councillor Gazane. Councillor Glass. Councillor Golby. Councillor Gran. Councillor Gutteridge. Councillor Hancocks.
For.
Councillor Hocking. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Condacor. Councillor Llewellyn-Nash. Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Longdon. Councillor Pandair. Councillor Phillips. Councillor Pomfret. Councillor Rudkin. Councillor A. Sargent. Councillor J. Sargent. Councillor J. Shepherd. Councillor T. Shepherd. Councillor Smith. Councillor Tandy. Councillor Tromans. Councillor Walmsley. Councillor Watkins.
For.
Councillor Wilson.
Okay, that's carried then. Right then, moving on with the questions from members. I would like to invite Councillor Glass to ask his question, please.
The Mayor, would the leader use her position within the combined authority whilst at the same time write to the Tory leader of the County Council asking for her support to argue for an enhanced West Midlands travel pass, which would be a great assistance not only to the people of Nuneaton and Bedworth, but a cheap and seamless travel card for all within the combined authority?
Councillor Jackson, would you like to reply?
Thank you, Mr. Question. I am more than happy to write to the leader of Warwickshire County Council to ask that she argue for an extension to the West Midlands travel pass that would benefit the people of Nuneaton and Bedworth. Why do we see such price differences? Today, my internet research tells me that if I travel by bus from Bedworth to Nuneaton and back, it will cost me £8.20. And yet, a day rider ticket for Coventry is £3.90, which I can use several times a day. Why, I ask, is this? Further, at a recent meeting of the West Midlands Combined Authorities, those women most affected by government changes to pension age were granted concessions on public transport. Is it not right that we here in our borough deserve exactly the same? I could go on, Mr Mayor, but conclude by saying I will happily write to the leader of Warwickshire County Council arguing for better fares for residents.
Jackson.
In light of the answer from the Leader of the Council, Mr Mayor, can I move the following motion? That this Council asks Warwickshire County Council to become a full member of the West Midlands Transport Authority excuse me, to ensure residents of this borough can fully benefit from the opportunities enjoyed by our neighbours across the border in better and cheaper public transport. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tandy. Does that phone seconder?
Can I second to the motion now? My first full-time job was 10 miles away from where I lived and I didn't have a car. That was okay because I lived in Coventry. There was a great bus network. Buses were regular and affordable. It was actually a pleasant experience travelling to and from work on the bus, believe it or not. You had the same people at the bus stop in the morning. You got to know your neighbours that you wouldn't have spoken to otherwise. We'd often sit and chat all the way to work, spanning the generation divide and developing good, strong networks that you could call on if the need arose. After work, there was a relaxing half-hour journey home when you could talk over the stresses of the day, have a laugh and unwind before arriving home refreshed and ready to enjoy your evening. Very different from today's commute to and from work.
Councillor Elliott, can you just... Councillor Troman's point of order.
Charming motion at hand. Can we confine to the motion?
To the motion, please.
Travel. So, travelling by bus back then, very different experience to what it is for most of us now in the rush hour, which is anything but a relaxing and sociable experience. And if I needed a bit of time to myself, I'd just pull out my Sony Walkman and put on, now that's what they call Music Volume 1 cassette. In the evenings, many of us would make another bus trip into town to go and see a film or go for a meal without worrying about who the designated driver was. Good times. Bus travel in Coventry was like mental health therapy. It was good for the soul. Times have moved on, but bus travel can still be a pleasant experience today, with buses boasting leather seats and free Wi-Fi. But it is too expensive and infrequent here in North Warwickshire to be a real alternative to getting in the car. Indeed, I had a nasty shock when I moved to Nuneaton in the late 1980s, when there was literally only one bus a day into town from where I lived, on the Poplar Farm estate, and the cost of that journey was eye-watering. I didn't have the luxury of being able to afford a car in those days, so found myself pretty much stranded, until I was able to join the other 3 or 4 car families in Nuneaton. Everybody seems to have 3 or 4 car per family these days, clogging up the road and adding to congestion.
Councillor Tomans, which point of order? Point out the point of order.
Needs to stick to the...
No, Councillor Tomans, point out the point of order. I'm not having keep standing up saying point of order when it actually ain't a point of order. Show me in the Constitution which point of order, where the point of order is.
6.8. A. 410 6A.
Councillor Tromans, stop keep standing up. I've told you time and time again, every meeting we have, you jump up and say something. Please sit down until you spoke to all of you. I'm not just pointing at you, I'm on about everybody. Just stand up, say what they want when they want. That is not how this is going to go on. This is my last full council because they'll hand the chains over before my next one. Brilliant. Right, okay, I've checked out 4610A or whatever it is, and it's down to my discretion. And I think that Councillor Elliott is talking to the motion. She's on about the experiences of travel, affordable travel. So, Councillor Elliott, can you please carry on with your...
Thank you. One of the most frequent concerns of residents is about the congestion around schools and even difficulties parking near to their own homes. There are just too many cars on the roads, and we have become far too reliant on our cars here in Nuneaton and Bedworth. It's not good for our mental health, and it's not good for our physical health either. In the West Midlands, there is a scheme at the moment where drivers are being paid up to £3,000 to ditch their cars and travel by alternative means. This is fully supported by the Tory Mayor, Andy Street, by the way. So, for the sake of our mental health, good community cohesion and improved physical health, let's be part of that. Let families go back to having 1 or 2 cars, not 3 or 4. Let our kids have the freedom to save for deposits on their first homes.
Your time is up now. So, sorry about that. Sorry about all the interruptions. But
no, thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Connaught.
Thank you on this motion. It is a real good idea to get us integrated into the West Midlands travel cards and tickets. For a point of information, the return fare from Bedworth to Nuneaton is £6.10 on the bus. What you found on the website was a day travel card or that sort of price. And of course, the whole system is crazy, and I understand why you thought it was £8. Because if you don't know how to use all these websites, you get a misleading fare. And this is why we need to be in the same travel zone, same travel card pattern as the West Midlands. And it is really important we do so, because Stagecoach in particular rip people off. And at the moment, it is cheap to go from Bedworth to Coventry because there's competition, and it's cheap to go from Nuneaton to Leicester. And in fact, a travel card to Leicester after the next fare changes will be cheaper than a travel card from Nuneaton to Bedworth. Because of the boundary at the Griff Island and because there's competition, the whole system is rotten, and it's cheaper for me to go shopping in Leicester than it is in Bedworth. Crazy world. So I fully support this. We need to get integrated transport. We have got a climate change emergency. We do what we can. We have just one car and cycle a lot, but I think that public transport is an absolute key. And buses carry 3/4 of the people on public transport. When they talk about public transport, people always, in London, in this bubble, always talk about trains. But actually the vast majority of buses, public transport journeys, are on buses. And buses are the way we're going to solve a lot of these climate change problems, getting people on the buses. And that involves them being as easy as possible to travel on and not having this boundary between Coventry and Bedworth, where suddenly you've got totally different ticketing, totally different arrangements. So I fully support this, and it's great that the Labour group have gone on board with something I've been campaigning about for a decade or so. And yeah, it's so good, because we need to get people talking about public transport. And it does, if it's cheap, save people money, give people flexibility, and importantly, give people in Nuneaton who are young without a car an opportunity to work in Coventry. So many Green Party young members have left Nuneaton to live in Coventry or Leicester because they get this public transport. And being green, a lot of them don't have cars. So actually, yeah, I don't expect everyone else to cycle to Coventry, but I do want it to be easy to go on bus, so I fully support this. And please do hassle Stagecoach as well, because they are the most unreasonable organisation. And in addition to Bedworth, Galley Common is outside the Nuneaton Fair Zone. Absolutely mad.
Councillor Evans.
The Mayor, I do sympathise with a lot of the comments which have been made by members of the Labour group, and of course Councillor Condicor himself. I used to use the buses quite a lot before I got a car. The fares, bus fares across Nuneaton and Bedworth are extortionate for Stagecoach. Although I would say to members, if members of the public ever ask, I would encourage you to tell them to actually use the Arriva services instead, the 78 and 79, because they are actually far cheaper to use. The 79 service now goes from Kersley to Nuneaton, or Prologis Park to Nuneaton. So I do sympathise with a lot of the things that have been said by members across the chamber. I was kind of hoping that the person who would propose this motion, sorry, Councillor Tandy, would have said in her opening remarks whether this is possible, because when I first looked into this, when I first became interested in public transport, about why the fares in Nuneaton and Bedworth are so extortionate and so mixed, it was because obviously Coventry and Birmingham subsidise the West Midlands Transport Authority quite a lot. But when I was looking into it, I was under the understanding that district authorities, borough councils and district councils in Warwickshire and Warwickshire County Council itself can't actually become a member of the West Midlands Transport Authority. So on this basis, in principle, I mean, I do sympathise with a lot of the things that Labour members have said, but I don't think I'll have to abstain on this, because I don't actually, without that clarification, I don't believe that Warwickshire can actually be a member of the West Midlands Transport Authority.
So which point of order is it?
Order 410.6c, which would allow us to continue the question time session to continue this debate and hear from all questions. And that is a proposed...
Well, we'll have to vote on that then because it's been proposed, it's been seconded, but I did say at the beginning that we'd run out of questions, run out of time for questions. So, well, we're going to have to vote on to extend the time for questions, but I am prepared to finish this question off, but I'm...
Okay, so this is a recorded vote to suspend council procedure rules. Which reference was it for?
It's paragraph 410.6c.
Okay, so this is for or against suspending council procedure rules. Indicate for or against, please. Councillor Beaumont. Against. Councillor Brindley Edwards. Councillor Brown. For. Councillor Croft. For. Councillor Daffin. Councillor Doughty. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Evans. For. Councillor Gazane. For. Councillor Glass. Against. Councillor Golby. Councillor Gran. For. Councillor Gutteridge. For. Councillor Hancox.
Against.
Councillor Hocking. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Condacor. Councillor Llewellyn-Nash. Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Longdon. Councillor Pandair. Councillor Phillips. Councillor Pomfret. Councillor Rudkin. Councillor A. Sargent. Councillor J. Sargent. Councillor J. Shepherd. Councillor T. Shepherd. Councillor Smith. Councillor Tandy. Councillor Tromans. Councillor Walmsley. Councillor Watkins.
Against.
Councillor Wilson.
So I'll use my casting vote for against that. So that falls.
Question. How many minutes have we got left on the clock for the 45 minutes?
Right, so Councillor Evans, you've got. Have you finished your? Yeah, so you're finished. So Councillor Jackson, right to apply.
Can I move a recorded vote?
Right, so that's been moved and seconded. Then we move to the vote. We're out of time. So, recorded vote. And on the Mayor's discretion, I was going to allow Councillor Evans to finish, but he'd finished. And so now I've just moved to Councillor Jackson, who's moved to the vote, to finish the question. We're not moving on to any more questions. When we've just voting on this motion now. We're voting. We're not debating anymore now. We're just voting on it. Well, I can assure you it does matter. So we move it. We're going to vote on that now. Point of order. Which point of order is this?
410.6c that states that the questions shall not exceed 45 minutes. We have now exceeded the 45 minutes. We've heard the buzzer and the timer has gone off. And therefore, there's no discretion to continue or to allow votes after that time, sir.
And it quite clearly says discretion of the Mayor. I am the Mayor. Last time I looked in the mirror. And so I'm moving to the discretion on the Mayor that, no, we're finishing this debate. We're voting on this debate. It is that's it. It's the Mayor's discretion. That's how it's happening. So, Simone.
Okay. You'd indicate for or against the original motion.
Sorry, Mr. Or whether we're moving on the motion, the vote, but on the motion. That'll do me.
Just to clarify, for or against the motion, please. Councillor Beaumont. Councillor Brindley Edwards. Councillor Brown. Councillor Croft. Councillor Daffin. Councillor Doherty. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Evans. Councillor Gazane. Councillor Glass. Councillor Golby.
We're voting on the motion, this motion.
So, Councillor Golby. Councillor Gran. Councillor Gutteridge. Councillor Hancox.
4.
Councillor Hocking. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Condacor. Councillor Llewellyn-Nash. Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Longdon. Councillor Pandare. Councillor Phillips. Councillor Pomfret. Councillor Rudkin. Councillor A. Sargent. Councillor J. Sargent. Councillor J. Shepherd. Councillor T. Shepherd. Councillor Smith. Councillor Tandy. Councillor Tromans. Councillor Walmsley. Councillor Watkins.
4.
Councillor Wilson.
Okay, so that motion's carried. So all the rest of the questions now will be answered within the next 7 days. Well, 7 working days.
Yeah, thank you.
And we'll carry on with business. Special urgency decisions, there is none. And now on to number 10, Cabinet. Report by the Leader of the Council is attached. I invite the Leader of the Council, Councillor Julie Jackson, to present her report.
This report, I think item 2 is particularly important to draw attention to, that the Council has been successful in gaining a High Court injunction in regard to unauthorised traveller encampments. Otherwise, Mr Mayor, I and my colleagues are more than happy to answer any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Councillor Evans.
Question to the portfolio holder for planning and development with regards to the Cabinet meeting last week. Item 7, Statement of Common Ground with the Woodlands Action Group. It appears the Planning Department did not inform the Woodlands Action Group that the item was actually on the agenda, despite the item being about...
Order it is, please.
Report to Council that covers the 13th of March meeting, Mr Mayor, only. I think Councillor Evans is referring to other meetings that have taken place.
Okay, Councillor Evans, so you got that, yeah? Okay.
I thought I'd give it a go. It was a very simple question. It was literally a yes or no, but, you know.
Oh, you give it a go, all right. Councillor Condacor.
No, I lists a number of funds on the final page from the West Midlands Combined Authority. Could I ask the Leader of the Council, has the Council applied for any funding through the Combined Authority Brownfield Land and Land Remediation Property Fund?
Councillor Jackson. Jackson. Councillor Condacor.
Well, the first one is on delivering our futures, which is 2AI. We've got this report to discuss, but one question I'd like to ask the Leader is, why have we not had input from the public in creating this? The document was created and consulted on, but the public didn't actually shape the document, and particularly things like delivering the future, in there, it's all very bland and very wishy-washy, and if you talk to business or talk to environmentalists, they'd have particular asks, and they're not in that delivering our future document. So can I ask why you didn't actually have inputs from people like the environmentalists and the businesses in terms of what our future is?
Standing outside at market stalls in the town centre, consulting on both this year's budget, and I understand the development of this document. If that is incorrect, I'll stand corrected, but I certainly remember spending myself some time with senior officers talking to members of the public in this regard.
Jackson. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's in relation to 2A Part 2, recommendation from the EOSP, and specifically about the High Court injunction which is mentioned in the Cabinet report about Gypsy and Travellers. Upon reading the order, paragraph 4 of the order gives permission for defendants 1 and 2 to actually set up encampments in our area if there is agreement with, and their extended family, if there is agreement with this council. However, the order is silent on any evidence which is required to prove that the child in question is receiving treatment. Will the Leader of the Council now undertake to work with officers to clarify that omission from the order when it has its return date back at the High Court, and ask the High Court to amend that order so that evidence is required before any decision is made? That does not interfere with their human rights. It is a standard type of order which is made in many thousands of cases across the country to require disclosure. I don't see why Nuneaton and Bedworth should be any different. Will the Leader of the Council work to ensure that we get that as part of the amended order? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Jackson.
So that I will listen very carefully to any legal advice given by senior officers of this council before we return to the High Court at any future date.
Of Councillor Wilson, but I just want to press that issue is, rather than asking and waiting to receive advice, will she go away and ask the question of legal office of our officers to do the review as and to strengthen that particular point, as Councillor Wilson's just alluded to, an active going to officers rather than some passive waiting for comment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I could refer Councillor Walmsley to that, but can I just explain to Councillor Walmsley that I meet on a very regular basis with senior officers of this council, as you would rightly expect me to. I listen to their advice. Sometimes I ask them if they will look into issues, and I will continue to act in that manner, as is appropriate of the Leader of the Council.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Concord.
Thank you very much. At the end of the West Midlands Combined Authority bit, where it says Housing Land Single Commissioning Framework Update and Key Principles, confidential report. When do we actually find out what the West Midlands Combined Authority is doing? Because obviously the Land and Housing Single Framework, whatever it is going to be very important. And we have been done over with the borough plan and how it's done stuff. And I don't want all the land stuff and housing stuff to be done in secret. So can you explain why it's secret, and when what the West Midlands Combined Authority is doing is going to be made public, please?
A report to all members, or rather officers did on my asking them to, in regard to matters of the West Midlands Combined Authority. I think actually something like a quarterly report to elected members about what is occurring at the West Midlands Combined Authority, I'm more than happy to ask that sort of a bullet point goes to all members of the council. I think that's a valuable suggestion.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Evans.
Yeah, obviously, Councillor Concord did indicate. But with regards to the West Midlands Combined Authority Brownfield Land and Property Development Fund, could I ask the Leader which sites in the borough the council have applied for? I do appreciate that you might not be able to declare that due to commercial sensitivity. If that's the case, then fine. But there is obviously a site in my ward which I'm sure the Leader will know about. The brownfield land owned by the council behind the Cricketers Arms, which I'd like really the council to consider applying funding from the West Midlands Combined Authority towards that, because my constituents do actually want housing, social housing to be built there, and it's a fantastic opportunity for the council.
I'm really changed their mind about the value of the West Midlands Combined Authority, as in only in February they decided in their budget that we would withdraw our membership of the West Midlands Combined Authority. So I'm glad to see that they now are changing their minds. In regard to the piece of land in Councillor Evans' ward, I understand the council owns but a very small, little piece of that land. Can I suggest that Councillor Evans meets with appropriate council officers to discuss the matter further?
Thank
you. 2, with the High Court injunction, I just wanted to ask a brief question. It says since the 19th of March, so nearly a month, we've been in talks with the police and the county council to discuss the terms. I'd like to ask if we've got any update on that at all, and also what impact, if any, would this have on privately owned land purchased by travellers. We've got a piece currently between Kingswood and Galley Common that has been purchased apparently by travellers, that we were waiting for something to happen. They've had work carried out. So if that has been purchased by travellers, they decide to move on to it without planning permission, will this speed up the process of evicting them? Thank you.
Is there anything else, Jackson?
I believe that this order does not apply to private land, but what I will do is ask our Director of Governance and Recreation, maybe a slightly different type, Philip Richardson, to actually provide regular updates to elected members. I think that's the best way forward in this regard. Obviously, there aren't weekly updates, you will appreciate that, but as and when there are updates required, I'm sure that Mr Richardson will keep us fully informed, and we will address your point in regard to private land in the next update. Thank you.
Just one paragraph up from the end of the West Midlands Combined Authority. It's talking about structural and governance update about the West Midlands 5G project. I'm very keen we don't miss out and be in the sort of slow lane for this technology. And can I ask, are we involved in that 5G structure and governance, or is it something that we'll have to wait for the crumbs to drop off the end of the Leamington and Coventry high-tech superhighway?
So.
5G benefit to our authority from this. And again, Mr Mayor, I think this is best addressed in that quarterly report update to elected members that I promised in an answer to a previous question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In relation to the quarterly performance report at 3A1, I raised the point at Cabinet that there are some directorates where not even 60% of the employees have received performance reviews. As a manager of staff myself, I find this incredulous to believe, especially when I'm given an answer that staff can opt out of having a performance review. In any form of work, as I understand it, certainly in my organisation where I work, you have no choice over whether you have a performance report, even if it's just to say you are doing fine. Will the Leader of the Council undertake to work with the senior officers to correct this oversight, because members of the public deserve to know that every single member of this authority's staff is having their performance monitored in the correct way and that poor performance is being dealt with in a robust manner. I'm not satisfied unless all members of staff are having that performance review. We are dealing with that. We need that assurance, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Jackson.
Quarterly monitoring performance reports are scrutinised in depth by Cabinet on a regular basis, and issues that we have concerns about are raised appropriately with senior officers.
Is in relation to the Part 4, which the board on the 22nd of March 2019 that covered items that may have a direct impact on Nuneaton Bedworth Borough Council. The report doesn't state whether or not we sent anybody, be that officer or be that a representative, to said meeting. Could the leader confirm if we did, and if so, whether it was an officer or an elected representative, please? Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Wilmsley, that at every meeting of the West Midlands Combined Authority Board itself, that both myself and an officer of this council attend. There was one board meeting which I did not attend, which Councillor Phillips attended. I believe so with an officer. Thank you.
Okay, that seems to be all questions on that one, so we'll... Councillor Golby.
Move a motion to suspend Standing Order 4.11.1, please. Do I need to read it out?
Right, okay, so I've got a motion and I've got a seconder on 4.11.1. And you want some clarification on what 4.11.1 is. So, Phil, could you read that out, please?
So, Councillor Golby has moved to suspend council procedure rules 4.11.1, which is regarding motions on notice, which is except for motions which can be moved without notice under Rule 12, written notice of every motion signed by at least 3 councillors must be delivered to the head of paid service, excuse me, not later than noon, at least 8 working days before the date of the meeting. These will be entered in a book open to public inspection. Councillor Golby is proposing to suspend council procedure rules and suspend that item in the Constitution.
Right, okay then, so we've now going to vote on whether to suspend 4.11.1. Is it a recorded vote or are we just going for show of hands?
Okay, if you could indicate for or against. Councillor Beaumont? Against. Councillor Brinley Edwards? Councillor Brown? Councillor Croft? Councillor Daffin? Councillor Doherty? Councillor Elliott? Councillor Evans? Councillor Gazane? Councillor Glass? Councillor Golby? Councillor Gran? Councillor Gutteridge? Councillor Hancox? Councillor Hocking? Councillor Jackson? Councillor Condacor? Councillor Llewellyn-Nash? Councillor Lloyd? Councillor Longdon? Councillor Pandare? Councillor Phillips? Councillor Pomfret? Councillor Rudkin? Councillor A. Sargent? Councillor J. Sargent? Councillor J. Shepherd? Councillor T. Shepherd? Councillor Smith? Councillor Tandy? Councillor Tromans? Councillor Walmsley? Councillor Watkins?
Against.
Councillor Wilson?
Okay, so that's lost. So going to move on with business on to number 11 now. Recommendations from Cabinet or other committees delivering our future 2019-31. A report from Cabinet is at page 68 of the agenda. Councillor Jackson, will you move the recommendations set out on the agenda paper?
Overarching ambition is to aim to achieve the greatest improvement in quality of life in Warwickshire by 2031. This document has 3 aims, each with a number of strategic priorities. The themes and priorities have been developed following consultation with local residents, communities, businesses and partners within the borough. A dedicated workshop has also been provided to which all elected members were invited to attend. The success of delivering our future will be monitored via a performance management framework, which will be regularly reviewed and refreshed during the lifetime of the document. A number of headline performance measures have been included, and in addition to these, localised, specific performance indicators will be delivered within departmental action plans, which sit underneath this document, and they will be detailed. Overall progress of these plans will be monitored in accordance with the Council's performance management framework. Mr Mayor, in having said those few words, I so move adoption.
On a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Does any member wish to speak? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would like to move an amendment to the proposal to insert on page 74, underneath Theme 3 Investment, making the most of what we have, to include a priority 7, heritage, and to insert specifically to promote and celebrate the rich heritage of our borough, including our cultural and industrial achievements. This document, in my view, does lack some finer details and specificity about how it's going to relate to Nuneaton and Bedworth, but I have spoken to officers tonight and they assure me that the supplementary documents which will sit under that will deal with that. But I think we need to rectify a glaring hole in this report, which is the heritage of Nuneaton and Bedworth we should be proud to promote. And I don't see why this should be contentious, because whilst we have to look to the future, we should also, in my view, celebrate the best of our past. We have a number of items across Nuneaton and Bedworth. We have George Eliot, we have Nicholas Chamberlain, we have the rich industrial and coal heritage that we have. And these are elements we can make work for us in trying to transform Nuneaton and Bedworth for the future. So, unfortunately, I wasn't able to actually attend the workshop for councillors because I was actually, as it happens, in a meeting with Brent, having a scheduled meeting with Brent as leader of the opposition with my deputy. All I'm asking for is that we correct this mistake, embrace our heritage, look forward to the future, and actually put this in the document. It should, in my view, gain cross-party support because it is relatively unpolitical and I think enhances this report rather than does anything to the detriment, Mr Mayor.
Mr Mayor.
Right, that threw me. Do we get a seconder to that then? So I'll take that as a seconder, yeah? Okay, so Councillor Jackson seconding that, so move to the vote.
There's a consensus between the two groups. I think it's just appropriate we all move to the vote.
Concord.
Very much because we have missed out a few things in here. I agree with the heritage matter, but I think on the environment matter, we talk about the built environment and we don't talk so much about the natural environment. And I would like to move an amendment that we actually remove the word built, so actually we enhance our environment. So that would include natural and built environment, because we do need to actually look after not just the physical buildings, but also all the other things in the borough, our trees, our ponds, etc. So I would like to actually move that we remove the word built environment, so it actually covers all the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Concord. Well, that's not found a seconder. Councillor Lloyd, you've moved to the vote. Does that find a seconder? Okay, thank you. Right, okay, let's move to the vote then. So, we're going to move to the vote on the vote. So let's vote on the vote, please. Against? Right, one against, all four. Right, now vote on the vote. On the amendment. On the amendment, then, on the amendment. Against? Okay then, brilliant, that's carried. Right, moving swiftly on. Amendments to the Council's procedure rules. A report from the Audit and Standards Committee is at page 77 of the agenda papers. Councillor Tandy, will you move the recommendation set out in the agenda papers?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the recommendation to the amendments to the Council procedure rules at Appendix A be approved, and it also recommended to the Council that the Constitution be amended accordingly. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Tandy, does that find a seconder?
Speak.
Councillor Evans, you've indicated.
Mr Mayor, I think as in these amendments, there's a few good things that are good, but actually the vast majority of this is bad for the council. It would prevent transparency and democracy happening in this place. With regards to the amendment to ban supplementary questions, I think it's a real shame that over recent years Labour mayors have prevented members from being able to ask supplementary questions. And I think one of the reasons why the length of questions, members' questions and public questions as well, have got so long over recent years is because we'll have to ensure that we'll get our points across. And obviously without supplementary questions we can't do that. So that's why questions are so long. I think going to the extent of banning them is quite draconian to some extent. And I'd make the point as well that even some of the worst run councils in the UK, namely Tower Hamlets, even allow members to ask supplementary questions. That's in their constitution. I did bring a copied page of it to the Audit and Standards Committee, but I accidentally recycled it, so I couldn't bring it to this meeting today. Limiting questions to 3 sentences, again, rather draconian. I don't understand how you can enforce this. I don't believe there's a legal definition of a sentence. So, I could just write a whole page of words, put 20-odd semicolons in and say it's a sentence. So I don't know how you can enforce and police that. Banning recorded votes on procedural motions. Well, the LGA definition of a councillor is a councillor's primary role is to represent their ward or division and the people who live within it. As such, I believe the people in my ward have the right to know how I vote on this council. If recorded votes on procedural motions are banned, people will not be able to see how I vote in the minutes of this meeting. They could watch the video, but there's a good chance there'll be technical difficulties with the video. So, I just wanted to put that in there. Obviously, it's been done to save time. Would it save time? Not really, because technically you could have 34 members stand up, make points of orders, and say that they want their vote recorded in the minutes. And if this is pushed through tonight, if there's a procedural motion, I will be doing just that. And I hope the 15 other members on this side of the chamber will do it as well. Banning motions after questions. Well, actually, as we've seen tonight, it benefits both all 3 political groups in this council. And considering I'm told that it was actually the Councillor Tandy's idea in the first place, I'm surprised that she wants to move this report to take it out. So whilst there are a few good points in the amendments, on the whole, it's bad. I really cannot vote against it. For it.
I've been called to speak. I would like to echo the words of Councillor Evans has just made, and I think that I'm going to go through a couple of these that I think are absolutely draconian measures that just don't warrant anything in this day and age. I must say one of my big concerns is moving the questions to the end of council without any form of protected time whatsoever, because we've seen many of the councils of late have continued to the full and over the 3-hour time limit in order to see the business done. And I think from memory of the last 5 councils we've had, I think 3 of them have gone over the time, which would have meant substantially over the time, which would have meant that there was no time for the questions, i.e. they've gone 45 minutes over the 3-hour rule as at present. So I'm very concerned about that. I think members of the public will be very concerned that their elected councillors cannot come here and ask a question of a portfolio holder and hold to account whatever the ruling group is doing, be that currently as it stands or be that if the tables are ever turned someday. This is the reality of these rules, Mr. Mayor. I welcome, Mr. Mayor, the actual addition of 4.13.4 that content must comply, must follow the item on the agenda. However, we've seen in most recent councils clearly there is a standard to be applied where one side is clearly given more latency than another, including to members of the public when they're asking their questions. Genuine members of the public told to speak, and yet members of of a political party being allowed to just go on about government cuts that's nothing to do with the particular item, I refer to the Extraordinary Council, sir. So that particularly really does concern me. I also echo the comments of Councillor Evans in relation to recorded votes. I think they're a hugely important procedural tool of this authority, and actually to be able to record a vote and to be able to do so on a procedure motion will allow our members of the public to scrutinise us, and allows them, as we currently do, to scrutinise what we do. It allows them to see very clearly what we stand for or what we do not stand for, what we agree for or what we disagree, and we are putting our name next to exactly that, exactly where we stand. I welcome the additions of 4.13.11, which clearly states that in the event that it's tied, or in the event that Mayor is using discretion, that has to be minuted. I'm very grateful to you, Mr Mayor, for having done most of that this year, following the first couple of councils where a couple of points of order, but actually I think relatively since then it's happened anyway. So I think this is just an adoption of what we've sort of come to do by convention anyway. Mr Mayor, my biggest concern is clearly to the changes of the points of order. Points of order allow to ensure that infringements of the council's rules and procedures are taken at the time of the infringement, so they can be adjudicated upon and be corrected where necessary. And I think it really important, and other local authorities across the country do not have all hear points of order at the time at which they're raised, and that includes actually down in the House of Commons as the same points as well. And I think that is a particularly important change to speak against. Further, Mr Mayor, I also remain concerned about the ability of members to ask questions of the advice being given. I think that is a hugely important point in our democratic right, because nobody has the monopoly on being right all of the time, not even wonderful legal minds such as ours in the corner. But I think it's very important and only right that we as members are here to challenge, A, opposition to challenge the leadership party, but B, all members, we are here to challenge the work of the council, to ensure that we challenge what decisions are being made, what officer decisions are being made in the best interests of the residents who vote for us. Moving forward, Mr Mayor, the one point that I really do like, and I'm very glad has been taken on board, is the appointment of substitutes. I think we can all agree some of the committees, particularly I think to planning, that meets I think approximately every 3 weeks or 3 to 4 weeks, is quite an intensive piece of work and committee to sit on, and I think it's absolutely right that we can try to look for the substitutions in those kind of regulatory committees. As I say, Mr Mayor, I really have major concerns about the proposals as on the paper this evening. I think what we should do is quite clearly throw them out, look to work again, pick the good stuff, and let's come back with a better idea.
Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't think anyone in this chamber doubts that there are some elements of this chamber's performance where we can actually improve, and sometimes the heat of the moment, the cut and thrust of debate can overwhelm us sometimes, and there are changes that need to be made to the Constitution. But these changes go way too far. Indeed, in the Constitutional Review Working Party, I challenged a number of these issues. There were no votes in the party, and I raised specific. I see Councillor Jackson shaking her head. I quite vividly remember, and I'm sure Councillor Smith can back me up on this because he was there, I challenged not having motions following questions. I find it ironic that you're wanting to abolish those tonight when you've just used 2 yourself to try and do that. Also, to get rid of the ability to have recorded votes. I tried to mitigate the impact of what you were doing by saying at least the Mayor has to record that he has said there is sufficient debate, but that is not anywhere near good enough to actually enable a member of the public to be able to read at a glance how any one of us has voted. Now, in the meeting, we even had one councillor say, what is the point in us debating this? Because we have the numbers. It was a Labour councillor, not us. A Labour councillor turn around and say, why are we even debating this issue? We have the numbers, we can push it through, so there's no point having this debate. I then even asked, well, should we not, if you take that line of argument and follow it through to its logical conclusion, I said, well, you should just have the Leader of the Council rubber stamp every single decision. He said, you move it, I'll propose it. Didn't you, Councillor Longdon? Just goes to show the contempt that some people have. You haven't spoken yet, so you can't move it.
Actually, Chair, I said I would second it if he moved it. Get it right.
You can't move a proposal for a personal explanation if you haven't yet spoken, Councillor Longdon. But that just goes to show the contempt that some members opposite have. They think, because they've controlled this authority for 43 years, they have the absolute God-given right to say how proceedings in this chamber should be conducted, what people should have, what people should think, and just hope they're voted in again every 2 years. That's not good enough. And what members opposite are forgetting is one critical thing. One day, and I hope it's very soon, because we have said in 2020 to the residents, help is on the way, hold on. You guys could be sat right here and you could be subject to exactly the same rules where you can't scrutinise, you can't ask questions, and you can't do your basic job of holding people to account. You should be aware of what you wish for over there on that side of the chamber, because what you are doing is strangling debate. If this was to happen in any other country, Zimbabwe probably has better democratic standards than what we are looking at tonight. And they had Mugabe for, 40 years? We had Dennis Harvey for almost 30 years, so I suppose there's not a lot of difference in that. But this proposal undermines the very foundations of our democracy, which is holding those in power to account. The powerless holding those with the power to account. And I cannot support this because you have railroaded this through. You didn't even take votes in the committee. You said you don't care because we've got the numbers anyway, so let's just push it through. That's not democracy, and you deserve to be punished at the ballot box when it comes to it, because you have let down the residents severely, time after time after time. Borough plan, green bins, and now democracy itself in the heart of this chamber. I will not be supporting this, Mr. Mayor, and I call for a recorded vote on this damage to democracy.
I don't know what just happened there, because we've still got some speakers, and we're still debating it as far as I know. We're still debating it. Councillor Jackson.
To personal attacks on individual members, be they sat in this chamber or they be honourable members that have since resigned as councillors from this chamber. I think that is outrageous that the leader of the opposition makes such comments about people who are no longer in this chamber and therefore unable to put their point of view. Mr. Mayor, I note that one of the speakers on the opposite benches tonight has since left the chamber, momentarily, I presume. Actually is, okay, he's behind me. He was a member of the Constitution Review Working Party and had every opportunity to put all of his concerns to that working party. Mr. Mayor, I'm not critical that he couldn't attend any of the meetings I went to put in person his concerns. I'm not critical of people's non-attendance at meetings, but I just point out that he was unable to attend. Mr. Mayor, just a couple of points in regard to some of the wrong assertions made opposite. All members will be able to ask questions of Cabinet members. And if there is insufficient time to receive a verbal reply, a written response will be given. Exactly what happens now, Mr. Mayor, and indeed will follow from this meeting. Mr. Mayor, points of order. I think it has to be acknowledged that the vast majority of points of order that are made in this council chamber are not valid points of order. We might refer to several made this evening, and in actual fact, I would assert that some of those points of order interrupt democracy because they are stymieing people's abilities to actually address council. Mr Mayor, substitutes are welcome with appropriate training on regulatory committees. We have not, let's be very clear, we are not in these proposals suggesting the removal of recorded votes on motions. Quite rightly, members of the public deserve to know how I voted in regard to any motion if a recorded vote is called for. That is not there has been some disrespect for the Mayor this evening, and I think it continues, in my opinion. Mr Mayor, there is no
points of explanation, until a personal explanation or anything, until the speaker is finished. Points of order interrupt, but this is not a point of order. So I'll let Councillor Jackson finish, as I would you, and then you can come out with your points of order or your personal explanation or whatever. But that's already in the Constitution. Councillor Jackson, can you continue?
really important that residents of this borough know there is no proposal in here to stop recorded votes on motions. Everyone will know how councillors in this chamber vote if a recorded vote is moved on a motion. And Mr Mayor, I find some of the comments that are being made in here quite strange, considering that at the end of the last Constitution Review Working Party, the chair of that meeting went around all of the members present. As I've said, one member didn't attend, but of all of the members who did attend, and asked them, are you in agreement with this, or words to that effect? Mr Mayor, a shadow cabinet member, Councillor Smith, was there, and the Leader of the Opposition, Councillor Wilson. And Mr Mayor, I don't recall them voting against.
Councillor Evans.
94, 4.15.4c, there shall be no recorded vote for any closure motion moved.
Sorry, I thought I'd jump up. I thought I caught you. For a point of personal explanation, actually, the meeting that Councillor Jackson refers to, which I was able to attend, was cancelled at short notice. I provided that I could not attend the next one and asked for a change of dates. I actually asked for a clarification on the time, and I received no reply to my email request.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Condacor.
This is obviously getting a bit heated, and I would think we should actually take this item off the table, go and work on some of the issues, and come back with a better thing that everyone can agree is a way forward. Because at some point, the sides may swap over, different people may be in power. We need a constitution that's going to last and actually that people are happy with. So we don't. If we get the constitutional changes wrong, there's going to be more bitterness and more difficult meetings. I go on to the item about questions. I've had the last 3 meetings my question not asked at the meeting. Obviously, I don't like putting my questions in a long, long way ahead, because if I do so, they can't be topical, and also things can change and they're out of date. But the last 3 meetings, I've not had my question asked. So I think we need to change the Constitution, because we've had 3 Labour questions asked tonight, just 1 Conservative question, and no questions from myself. If I sat in the audience and asked a question to the member of the public, I would have had an answer tonight. But as a councillor, I don't. So I do think we need to sort out questions. The 3 sentences rule is silly. If you look at today's questions, all these questions could be asked in about 1 minute. I think my question and Mr Evans, Councillor Evans' questions were the longest, but none of the questions were more than a third of a page. So I think if we are changing the rules in the Constitution, a third of a page is a more sensible rule than actually how many full stops there are. So I agree questions need to be punchy into the right point. They do need enough of an explanation. And if you look at the questions like mine and Councillor Evans, they're a nice length. There's enough detail in there without being a long statement. And I think if we want to get through our questions, having them short and punchy, and unlike Councillor Beaumont, not reading 4 or 5 minutes worth of legal blurb that we all know, but actually having a punchy answer as well, would actually mean we'd be able to get through 8 questions. 8 questions, 1 minute for question, 2 minutes for answers, would go through in about 24 minutes. So I think if we can actually have punchy questions and punchy answers, then we'd have a bit of time for these little mini debates. I think the mini debates are useful, but they shouldn't be used to actually exclude questions. Because it's been 3 meetings I've not managed to ask a question. There's a lot more in here that needs to go through. I think the whole thing needs a proper review. And the County Council is far better at these debates. They're quite long, but we do a lot of things at the County Council I think we can learn from here. One is about deviation. The main rule that we're putting in here is you can't deviate. So talking about childhood cycling trips or going on the buses, that counts as deviation by some people and not others. I think we need to let people have their 3 minutes, not over-police them, but the one rule that is quite useful is no repetition. So if we've got 16 councillors in a particular bench, we don't say the same thing 6 times. A no repetition rule is far better, and actually don't just duplicate the previous speaker. So we can actually get through the debate, and we've got lots of good speakers here, but they need to make different points. So I think we do need to work on this and get a better constitution. Because if we get it wrong, what we have is we have lots of really bitter meetings. We have people standing up and shouting. We have people trying to say, that's a deviation, that's not a deviation. I think we need to treat people more respect. I think we need to keep the meetings punchy so that actually they don't go on for 3 or 4 hours. And one other thing I would suggest is we have a separate meeting for setting the budget. Because the absolute killer meeting is the budget meeting. And the County Council has a meeting which is a budget setting meeting. So if we are reviewing this and taking it back for some more work, I think having a budget setting meeting in February and an ordinary council meeting would actually make the whole process a bit more sane. Thank you.
No repetitive. Brilliant. So now we've got another 6 speakers. And I'm hoping none of this is going to be repetitive. Councillor Golby.
Just to highlight a few points that I definitely don't agree with. 4A.8, no ability to ask questions because the meeting will be closed. If you're talking about moving questions to the end, it's easy. It's an easy get out to just close the meeting if there's nobody wants to take it over the 3 hours or we don't have the numbers. 4.9.4, questions can only be 3 lines. 4.10.5, Mayor can shut down questions if they see fit. Removal of motions based on questions asked. No debate of motions from questions, meaning we can only debate what's on the fixed agenda. As we've seen tonight, there is lots more stuff that needs to be brought to this council other than what's on the fixed agenda. The Mayor can stop a member from speaking. This is 4.13.4. Mayor can stop a member from speaking if they see fit, then move the councillor should not be heard further if they upset the Mayor, I'm sure. 4.13.12, points of order. There should be no discussion or challenge to the advice given to the Mayor or the Mayor's decision in a meeting. 4.15.4, there should be no recorded vote for any closure motion moved. 4.19.3, if a member challenges the Mayor in any way the Mayor disagrees with, then the Mayor can move they are not heard. So to put that in layman's terms, so everybody out there in the big wide world that's not used to reading constitutions, limits questions from councillors to 3 sentences. Currently we get 3 minutes per councillor to speak about anything we want during councillors' questions. That's a way for me to bring my representation to this council on behalf of my residents. You're going to put that in 3 sentences. That's not good enough. That's curtailing democracy. Number 2, banning supplementary follow-on questions. Not that we ever get them anyway, but to ban them outright, again, democracy, another nail in the coffin. Number 3, banning motions after questions. So basically we can only discuss what, at the moment, you decide to put on the agenda. If it's not important to you, then it doesn't get on. Like the adult changing places motion that I brought forward. It wasn't on the agenda. It's never been on the agenda until I stood up and put a motion after a question. Now, if you want to tell people out there with disabilities that they don't warrant going on a main agenda, then that's up to you. But it's up to me. It's incumbent on me to bring that to you. What you do with that information, which has been nothing, is up to you. But that is the only way that got into this room. So if you want to get rid of things like that, it's on you. Changes to points of order. There will be no challenge given in the chamber, even if the advice is wrong. Now, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but no challenge in the chamber. You cannot challenge. There is a blanket, cannot challenge. So you can get up and give the wrong advice. You can't challenge it because you're going to get shut down. Questions from councillors, which are usually at the start of the meetings, and is where we can put any questions to the council leadership, will be moved to the end of the meetings. And this is important, will not have a protected amount of time. So effectively, it's likely that the meeting will finish with me or anybody else not being able to publicly ask questions on behalf of people who have elected me. You will time me out, you'll do the 3 hours, and we'll all be off home and everybody will be having their tea, and we'll be frustrated, or you may be. You, because be careful what you wish for, as Councillor Wilson has said. The next mayor, who, given the numbers in the room at the moment, is quite likely to be Councillor Tandy, can decide that if a councillor says things that she doesn't like or they don't like or disagree with, for example, somebody challenges a ruling, or if that ruling is wrong, that councillor can then be banned from speaking for the rest of the meeting. The councillor will not be heard at the discretion of the mayor. So again, you're willing to shut down people like me that bring the representation to the people in here of my residents that have elected me, and you lot just want to keep hammering those nails into the coffin that's got the democracy inside of it. Well done, because keep going. I put this on Facebook. I had 13,500 people read this, and there was not much in support of what you're trying to do. Not much at all. So it's all on you. You choose to do this. We're not going to back this up. If you want to shut down debate and kill democracy in this chamber, please go ahead, because everybody out there will be made fully aware of what's going on.
Golby, Councillor Pomfret.
Mr Mayor, these issues have been debated. Many of the issues have come up, I don't know how many times, no doubt Councillor Condacor is counting. I move that we go to the vote. Thank you.
We've had 6 out of 12 speakers, so I'm going to propose that we move to the vote. Do I get a seconder? Yes. Okay, so Councillor Tandy's got the right to reply, and then we move to the vote.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Not very much to say, except I wish some people would have read the documents and the changes properly, because some of the points that have been raised were already in the Constitution and haven't been changed. And one comment that Councillor Wilson said, if or when, who knows who will be controlling this council next year, you'll get what you wish for. Fine. If it helps better debate in this council chamber, then we'll have what we wish for. Thank you very much. I move the recommendations, Mr Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So now... Okay, so
this is a recorded vote on the procedural motion to move to the vote. Okay. So for or against, please. Councillor Beaumont. Councillor Brinley Edwards. Councillor Brown. Councillor Croft. Councillor Daffin. Councillor Doherty. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Evans. Councillor Gazane. Councillor Glass. Councillor Golby. Councillor Gran. Councillor Gutteridge. Councillor Hancox, Councillor Hocking, Councillor Jackson, Councillor Condacor, Councillor Llewellyn-Nash, Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Longden, Councillor Pandair, Councillor Phillips, Councillor Pomfret, Councillor Rudkin, Councillor A. Sargent, Councillor J. Sargent, Councillor J. Shepherd, Councillor T. Shepherd, Councillor Smith, Councillor Tandy, Councillor Tromans, Councillor Walmsley, Councillor Watkins,
for
Councillor Wilson.
Okay, so I use my casting vote for. Okay, so now we're moving to substantive motion.
Okay. So if you could indicate for or against the substantive motion on the agenda, please. Excuse me. Councillor Beaumont. Councillor Brindley Edwards. Councillor Brown. Councillor Croft. Councillor Daffin. Councillor Doherty. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Evans. Councillor Gazane. Councillor Glass. Councillor Golby. Councillor Gran. Councillor Gutteridge. Councillor Hancox. Councillor Hocking. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Condacor. Councillor Llewellyn-Nash. Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Longdon. Councillor Pandair. Councillor Phillips. Councillor Pomfret. Councillor Rudkin. Councillor A. Sargent. Councillor J. Sargent. Councillor J. Shepherd. Councillor T. Shepherd. Councillor Smith. Councillor Tandy. Councillor Tromans. Councillor Walmsley. Councillor Watkins.
For.
Councillor Wilson.
Casting vote for. Right, can we have some order in here? Moving on with the business. Code of Conduct for Employees, Part 5 of the Council's Constitution. A report from the Audit and Standards Committee is at page 100 of the agenda. Councillor Tandy, will you move the recommendations set out in agenda paper?
I move the report, the recommendation from this report, Mr Mayor.
Was constitution that have just been voted on and adopted have taken into effect now or as of the next council meeting?
Okay, so Councillor Tandy's moved it. Is anybody seconding Councillor Pomfret? So just to confirm, Councillor Grant, it's the next council meeting. Okay? Right, Councillor Pomfret, you seconded it. Does any member wish to speak? Councillor Concourt?
Haven't done it like the Constitution. What changes have been made? On the Constitution, we had coloured bits so we could see what in the document has changed. This document just tells us a new code of conduct, and there's not really any clue as to if anything's actually gone in or out. So I would like that clarity if we're voting on a changed document. Also, there's been a big issue at the moment with gagging orders and when people leave employment around those issues. So I think the whistleblowing area and actually what happens with if they leave, they then have to sign a gagging order. I think that needs to be an area of investigation as well. So I'm not keen to vote on this at the moment because I don't know what the changes are and I do have concerns. I do believe from the BBC Freedom of Information request that gagging orders were used quite a bit at this council for people who've left the council.
Encore. Is there anybody else wish to speak? Okay. Right, thank you. Can we take the vote then, please? Okay, so all those in favour, can you please raise? Against? Any abstaining? No, okay, brilliant, thank you. Moving on with business. Vice chairs at regularity committees and audit and standards committee, articles 8 and 9 of the council's constitution. A report from the audit and standards committee is at page 113 of the agenda papers. Councillor Tandy, will you move the recommendations set out in the agenda paper?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the recommendations as the changes in Appendix A be approved and at 2.2 and at 2.3, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Tandy. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Pomfret. Does any member wish to speak? Councillor Concourt.
Thank you. We had two opposition groups, each with 3 members. And so I always get worried when we write in the Constitution and these changes, as it says on page 114, the main opposition group, that actually in the future we may have 2 opposition groups of equal size, or at least 2 opposition groups of a reasonable size. I mention this particularly because the Greens are catching up with Conservatives in the Euro polling at the moment. And I think it is a real opportunity as parties and things change in the future that we may not have just 2 big groups. And so I think we do need to phrase this in a way that actually means when we're looking for vice chairs, there is not a group that suddenly is the main opposition group. Because in the future, one opposition group may have 7 members, one may have 6, and suddenly the one with 7 has all the opposition chairs. So I do think we need to future-proof this thing for when we end the days of 2-party politics and when the Greens get more councillors than the Conservatives.
Councillor Walmsley.
I agree with, and I put on record my agreement with. I think that we've had a couple of instances where we've had committees where the chairman's not been able to attend, and where there's then had to be a process for electing a chair. And where it is, especially when we're in a minority council as we are at the moment, where it is that those committees are then tied without a chair, it could mean that meetings. There was one potential meeting that could have had to have been deferred to a future date because there could be no consensus on who should or shouldn't chair the meeting. I think what this does is this brings in line the regulatory committees and other committees and subcommittees to those which are currently administered to the overview and scrutiny panels. I think they work particularly well where you have a good vice chair. You've got 2 sets of eyes, particularly now that some of the committees are much larger. You've got 2 sets of eyes looking out for who's indicating, who's not indicating, and so forth. And it just sort of aids the chair a little bit as well during the meeting, and in addition to the fact that if a chair can't make a meeting for whatever reason, it allows it to continue on the night and continue with the business as was. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Both the Constitution Review Working Party and the Audit Committee, it has been debated at length. We seem to have consensus amongst most of the council. I move to the vote.
Councillor Phillips, yeah? Okay then. Right, so should we move to the vote then on that, please? All those in favour? Anybody against? Anybody abstain? No? Okay, just one against then. Just one against. Oh, that was procedural. That was to go to the vote. Okay, so now we're going to the vote. Can we vote on 4 against, 4? Against? Anybody abstain? No? Okay, right, thank you. Right, moving on to timetable of meetings. A report was suggested. Dates for meetings is... Oh, I've missed one. Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah. Sorry, I was getting a bit keen there, weren't I? Allowing other members onto the OSP committee working groups, part 4 of the Council's Constitution. A report from the Audit and Standards Committee is at page 115 of the agenda papers. Councillor Tandy, will you move the recommendations set out in the agenda papers?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the recommendations as printed.
Okay, does that get a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Pomfret. Does any member wish to speak? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think this is actually an area where it can enhance the work of what the council does, because at the moment we used to have an informal arrangement under previous Democratic Services officers where if you weren't on an OSP but you expressed an interest on another OSP's working party, you could do that, and for whatever reason, in the midst of time, it's not happened, someone's reinterpreted the rules or someone's enforced the rules. I don't really care. I actually think it made matters better when members who might at the moment be on external, they might have an interest in a particular item that the internal committee has said we want to form a working party on. And I think we would be missing out on that valuable experience if we don't allow that person on there. We all as councillors have our different interests, and in scrutiny we actually do some very good work across party. There has been some very good working parties across party in the OSPs over the years. I can certainly remember ones that I've done over end-of-life care. That's non-political, but that was a really extremely valuable piece of work across party political boundaries, which because that's now to do with the hospital, I sit on external, I couldn't do, I'm on internal, I couldn't do because that's external, but it's very close to my heart, having experienced that with a member of my family, and I'm sure there are other members across the chamber who are in similar positions, regardless of what topic it may be. So also it has a very practical aspect that not every committee can form a working party from its membership. And it would enable, so long as I think we compromised on 3 from the original working party, but then open it up to everyone else to say there are vacancies on this working party. Is anyone interested, whether they sit on OSP or they sit on none? So I think this is an area where we should actually push this through, because it will see better scrutiny, better representation, and hopefully better outcomes for our residents. So I support this proposal, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Just so that I don't do you out of any airtime next time, can you press the other mic, because the cameras are not swinging round to you, so just staying on me, and I don't want that. Councillor Condacourt.
I'm actually attending working parties, so this is a big improvement. At the County Council, we're very grown up and we've had a lot of very useful working parties. I've even chaired one at the County Council, such as the non-partisanness of some of the working parties. So I'm really keen on this, and I think one of the key points is people with special interests, because I've obviously got a big interest in rubbish and recycling, cycling itself, and various things, and we could have one on bus services, hopefully. So, yeah, I'm really keen on this, and I'm keen that we get people involved, because we do nothing useful in this chamber. Where we do useful things is in the committee rooms.
Thank you, today. I think the importance here is, and to reiterate, that is actually expertise in an area one of us may have through professional or through personal interest, expertise in a particular area that you may not be able to be on or not on an OSP. And I don't think that in the event that the OSP wants to fill the working party itself, I don't think we should be excluding those sorts of people from the debate, from the discussion. Allow them to bring any useful experience they may have into the discussion, into the debate, and go forward. I would make one request, which is a little pedant in me. If we could have the close of the brackets inserted, please, on 4E20. We've got an open brackets, except those who are excluded from etc., but there's no closed brackets, so could we have that inserted, please? Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Across the chamber, on those grounds and those grounds only, I move that we move to the vote.
Seconded.
Do we all agree that we move to the vote? Brilliant. Okay, let's move to the vote then. So, all those in favour? Okay, right, now. Moving on. Timetable of meetings 2019, 2020 and 2020 or 21. A report with suggested dates for meetings is at page 124 of the agenda papers. Councillor Jackson, will you move the recommendations set out on page 127 of the agenda papers?
Mr Mayor, to confirm, it's in the addendum that all members have had, which is to confirm that the Cabinet meeting that discusses the budget will now be at 6 p.m, to be consistent with other meetings.
Thank Councillor Phillips. Does any member wish to speak? Councillor Evans.
To put a friendly amendment to the timetable of meetings for 2019, 2020 and 2020-2021, I'd like to move that, as an amendment, that the start time of the internal overview and scrutiny panel, the external overview and scrutiny panel and the Audit and Standards Committee start time starts at 6 p.m. as opposed to 5 p.m. So what my amendment does is every council meeting, with the exception of the Planning Applications Committee, will start at 6 p.m. And I've left the Planning Applications Committee out because I know there would be a few difficulties in doing that with, people, developers and whatnot who want to attend the meeting, as do local residents. The reason I'm moving this is because we all want to ensure that the council is transparent, and there's a lot of interesting things that are discussed at the overview and scrutiny panels, particularly the external one with regards to healthcare in the borough. And what I'd like to ensure is that if members of the public actually want to attend these meetings, they should have the chance to, and not rushing from work to get to these meetings in time. So I formally move, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Does that get a seconder? But before it gets a seconder, can I just explain that before you joined this council, these used to be at 4:30, and the reason we moved them to 5 o'clock was to allow the professionals from healthcare and things to attend. I just personally think, and this is just me personally, think that moving it back a little bit might put a few of them off. However, if you get a seconder, that's fine.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to second that. A few members have spoken to me. Members on all sides of the chamber have working commitments, and a few other members have spoken to me and explained that 5 o'clock, and I know this myself when I used to work in Birmingham particularly, it can be a struggle to get here for 5 o'clock for some committee meetings, and to a large extent you're reliant in some cases on having a very forgiving and understanding employer if you are in those circumstances. I'm fortunate that my employer allows me to do so, but others do reluctantly and through gritted teeth allow members to do so. As Councillor Jackson has indicated about moving the budget cabinet meeting, which I agree with, which was for consistency, again this would ensure some consistency across the piece about moving the overview and scrutiny panels to 6 o'clock as well, especially with all the development which is going on across this town. Traffic is becoming increasingly difficult for many, many people. We've all complained about traffic when we've come to a meeting, and it is becoming more difficult to get to certain meetings in some instances. I think this is fairer to members who do work. I understand the point about getting people from professional bodies to come to scrutiny panels, may not do so at 5, might not do so at 6, but will at 5. But quite often those people are there past 6 anyway. And they're either going to buy in or they're not, whether it's 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, because we have no power to compel their attendance. This isn't like a select committee of Parliament where you can hold them in contempt. We're reliant on their goodwill anyway. And actually, some people might find it easier if they're giving evidence to come at 6 o'clock because of the traffic issues, because of work commitments and things like that. So I understand it's a very difficult balancing act. Whichever time you pick is never going to please everyone all the time. However, I think it is worthy of consideration by this council as to whether we want to go down that route, because we have to try and be a fair... I know we're not technically an employee of the council, even though we're taxed as an employee of the council, but we do have to try and be fair across the board, not just to officers, but also to councillors as well, in trying to ensure that they can meet and fulfil their duties. I certainly think it's worthy of debate in this chamber rather than glossing over it entirely, because members have raised those concerns in the past and no doubt will do so again.
Brown.
Quite simply, as anybody knows, with modern day life, getting to and from meetings is more and more challenging with the traffic that we've got. We're trying to encourage more diverse participation in the council, from members, from the public. We want to get people to attend, and quite frankly, holding meetings at a time that is traditional but suits us but doesn't suit the public is flying in the face of greater transparency and greater democracy, which is what we're here to try and encourage. So I think regularising these meetings to start at 6 o'clock is a sound and just proposal, and I certainly will be supporting it. Thank you.
5. We have shift workers in this borough who work outside of these hours, and frankly, I want to make these meetings as accessible to members of the public. Frankly, councillors are entitled to certain times off from work in agreement with their employees. Fairness to members, secondary in my opinion, to fairness to the people we represent. And can I say 6 o'clock, as a mum, when I first joined this council, of very small children, 6 o'clock was actually bath time and feeding your kids and putting them to bed. So I think there's an equal opportunities issue here. Had Councillor Wilson suggested that we did a consultation with those people we invite to our meetings to see how it may affect them, that we did a consultation of all elected members about their availability, if we did a consultation with members of the public, I may consider this to have some validity. As it stands, it has none, because there's no evidence base behind it. And Mr Mayor, I do suggest that we move to the vote on this.
Councillor Phillips, yep. Okay, so let's move to the vote on that. So we're having a vote on the vote. On the amendment, Councillor Condacor. Amendment, we're dealing with amendment first. No, so we're having a vote to move to the vote on the amendment. All those in favour, please show your hands. Against? Abstain? Okay, so it's moving to the vote as lost. Councillor Jackson, you wanted to speak?
Mr.
Councillor Hancock's. Right, so we're still on the amendment then. So we're still talking on the amendment. So Councillor Hancock.
So it was lost.
No vote.
All right. I've lost me a bit of paper now. On times of meeting.
You have just agreed we should immediately move to the vote.
So we voted to move to the vote, and it was lost. Councillor Longden.
That's the point of all. Councillor Condacor abstained. So 16-16, and it was your casting vote.
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Longden. Councillor Wilson, just a minute. So,
apologies, Mr Mayor.
I'm beginning to doubt my own sanity now. Right, so we voted on moving to the vote, and that lost. So now we're continuing with the amendment on the debate of the amendment. Is everybody clear on that? And you're indicating to speak. Yeah. Right. Okay. So because we're continuing to speak on the amendment, the next on my list was Councillor Hancock's.
As I started to say, one thing we can all agree on is we won't agree on times of meetings, and what suits one person doesn't suit another. And Mr Mayor, I know I go back a long way, but I remember when we used to have meetings in the morning here. Then we had meetings at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And we scrapped those times because we wanted to be more democratic, more open, and be able to get more members of the public to meetings. I know certainly within planning applications, very often, as the leader referred to, we used to consult with members and do a general consultation on what suited. And you know the answer, you could never get an agreement. Planning's slightly different because you've got to take account of the seasonal weather in case you're doing site visits or confidential items. But I'm not talking about just that. I'm not going to support the amendment because I don't think that it gives that opportunity for members of the public properly. And it's quite right. There's lots of people who work all sorts of odd shifts. The leader mentioned about people doing shift work night. It isn't even shift work as we remember traditional. People get called in at all sorts of hours, do all sorts of odd sorts of things. And I think we're making, again, over-egging something here. I think go for what we've got. If it doesn't work out, we can look at that again, Mr Mayor. But I don't see a thing for us to fall out about just for an hour on a meeting. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
the motion of Councillor Evans. I think actually if it's good enough for council, full council, for cabinet, and particularly if you look particularly over recent councils, I should say, not weeks, recent councils, you'll see that actually, having started at 6 o'clock, they've been pretty well attended by the public when there have been issues and items that concern them. I think it allows them much easier access to come in to our meetings, much greater openness and transparency, which I think is what we all should be very clearly after. I think that also, in addition to that, it would allow for us to, for all parties, to be able to recruit from a wider pool of candidates who may struggle for 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, etc., just to hopefully to allay the concerns of Councillor Hancock's. The motion that Councillor Evans put down was very clear that this was to apply to not apply to the Planning Applications Committee. It would apply to the OSPs and the Audit and Standards Committee. And so I absolutely wholeheartedly support and endorse this, and hopefully we can vote that through this evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
As a parent of young children, I actually would appreciate a later start on meetings, because my life is crazy enough as it is without trying to get here for 5 o'clock. I mean, it's almost like moving a mountain sometimes when you've got to, like you say, go through the traffic, sort the kids out, get them from school, get home, get them sorted, get them here. If I can get an extra hour out of that, bonus for me. It just works better. It also works a lot better for people who do work till 5 o'clock. And I know we are allowed time off, but they are not necessarily allowed time off. So we do find that there is a lack of representation from residents, and it has been a complaint that sometimes it is difficult for people to get into things where they really want to speak about things. We've had things where we've had a couple of people attending when we discussed the RISE mental health changeover from RISE to CAMS, and there was a couple of people there. I know there were more people that wanted to attend but couldn't really get there on time and couldn't commit the time to it because of when the meeting was starting. So I do think that we've had it in a fixed starting point for quite a while, and I'm not sure what harm it would do to actually just kind of change it and see whether it helps or not. We've seen one side of the coin. Maybe it's time to flip it and we can see the other.
Councillor Longden. Okay, Councillor Guttridge.
I fully support Councillor Kyle Evans's motion to move to 6 o'clock. I'm a sales rep. I travel the country lanes of Warwickshire, Leicestershire, Northamptonshire and Oxfordshire. I've done it for the past 40 years, and there's no country lanes now. The traffic is horrendous, and I fully support going back to 6 o'clock. I work in the farming industry. We don't stop milking the cows at 5 o'clock. They do need milking on a Saturday and a Sunday. We work 24/7. My wife is a midwife. She doesn't stop halfway through delivering a baby and saying, hang on, I've got to go home. She carries on. Many a time I've gone to bed at night and she's not been there and woken up, and she's put the hours in. So I agree, we've got to move with the times and move the meetings till 6 o'clock. We are all on shift works. My day consisted this morning, I was in the office for 6:45. I left the office, I've done a few jobs this afternoon, I've come here. I shall return home 9, half 9. I don't mind, but we've got to move with the times. The world is changing, and we've got to change with the world. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Guttridge. Councillor Llewellyn-Nash.
Councillor Evans, we've been talking about public transport tonight as well. In order to come to a meeting for 5 o'clock, I actually can't get here for 5 unless one of my colleagues gives me a lift. I come from the hospital in Coventry, and I have to get 2 buses because I don't drive the car, and that takes me over an hour and a half, would you believe? So starting meetings at 6 o'clock is really welcome for me. On the occasions when I do have to be for, say, a site visit on planning, I am at the will of my employer whether they let me come here or not. And I want to represent my ward. So starting later at 6 o'clock would be brilliant for me. But I think, as somebody else has also reiterated, that you're more likely to get more people in the public gallery, because if they're finishing work at 5, they can't be here for 5 for a debate to start. But 6 o'clock seems to be a time when it suits a lot of people.
Thank you, Councillor Nash. Councillor Phillips.
Yes, I fully understand the sentiments of what's been said tonight. However, I think we've had enough debate on this. People's personal circumstances change as the years go on. I just can't understand why the party opposite, who knew this was coming to Cabinet a week or so ago, didn't make any representation then. They know it comes up this time every year, and they didn't make any representation. They didn't put it through OSP to be looked at, to be voted on, for a recommendation like the made tonight to go through the scrutiny channels. Move the vote, Mr Mayor. Again.
Phillips. Well, there is no more speakers anyway, so we're going to have to move to the vote. Like I said at the beginning, I do think for the police and the hospital staff, it'll be a mistake, but let's do it. So this is the a vote on the amendment. So all those in favour of the amendment? Okay, thank you. Those against? Abstain. Okay, so the amendment is lost. So now
Mr Mayor, can I move straight to
Councillor Phillips. Okay, let's move to the vote on substantive motion. Oh, right, okay, so, yeah, that's what I say, move to the vote on that. So let's move, all those in favour, please. Against? Mayor's casting vote for. Okay, so that is almost.
You actually take the vote on that.
Oh, right, so I've got to take the vote on the vote. Right, let's take the vote on the vote. So, all those in favour? Anybody against? Okay, thank you very much. So, right, that's carried. And just before we all finish, Paul, the porter, has apparently got a dog that has been left with him. Oh, sorry, Councillor Longden, you take it away.
On Monday night, in the rear car park, a gentleman collapsed with a suspected heart attack. It turned out to be a stroke, and he was very worried about his dog, as were the paramedics who came. And Paul, the porter, kept the dog safe, took it home that night, and brought it back yesterday morning. The gentleman has been in contact since and said, please don't put the dog with the RSPCA. And another member of staff has taken the dog, and there's 3 other members of staff who are lined up, ready if that particular placement doesn't work, and they've lost dogs and things like that. And I really think, despite what the members opposite think, because they never ever praise our staff, but this case, I think... Oh, shut up, you don't. To our staff. But we need to have it recording those particular things very well.
Right. Thank all councillors, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes tonight's business. Have a safe journey home and see you at the next one. Thank you very much.